Every Sunday, a poor black boy walked 6 miles, barefoot, to visit the grave of a billionaire no one else mourned. He never cried, never spoke, just sat there, alone. Nobody knew his name, nobody asked why. But when a journalist finally followed him, she uncovered a secret so powerful it changed how the world remembered the most hated man in town and the boy who saved him in silence. Nobody knew his name. Every Sunday at 6 a.m. sharp, a small black boy, no older than 9, walked barefoot down the long gravel road that led to the Hillcrest Memorial Cemetery. His hoodie was 3 sizes too big, his jeans were ripped at the knees, and the soles of his shoes had thinned so much you could see the earth beneath. Yet he came. Rain, frost, heat. It didn't matter. He sat quietly at the grave of James W. Aldridge, the wealthiest and most hated man in the entire state. And he never spoke a word, not a tear, not a prayer, just stillness. The grave was an elegant black marble monolith that towered above the others like it still demanded attention, even in death. Etched into it in gold were the words, James W. Aldridge, visionary, builder, leader. But no flowers ever rested at its base, no family, no mourners, just this boy. The groundskeepers whispered about him. Some said he was a runaway. Others claimed he was just another poor kid from Hollow Ridge trying to survive. But none of them dared to ask. They just let him be, because something about his silence was sacred. Then came Clara Monroe. She'd once reported from war zones, covered revolutions and coups, but after losing her job at a major outlet, she was back in her hometown, broke, bitter, and chasing scraps. When she first saw the boy from the road, she thought he was a statue. He sat so still. But the moment she saw the grave he sat beside, her breath caught. James Aldridge. She remembered that name. Everyone did. The man had built an empire and crushed lives doing it. 10 lawsuits, 2 bankrupt neighborhoods, a media scandal about racist zoning laws that he denied until the day he died. So why was this boy, black, poor, alone, visiting his grave with more loyalty than Aldridge's own family? It didn't add up. The next Sunday, Clara returned with a camera. She sat on the opposite bench, pretending to scroll through her phone. The boy didn't flinch. The Sunday after that, she brought a coffee and just watched. Again, no reaction. But the 4th Sunday, when she sat down and quietly asked, "Why him?" the boy finally looked up, and what she saw in his eyes wasn't confusion. It was grief. His eyes didn't belong to a child. When he looked at Clara, something behind them seemed far older, like they had seen too much, too early, and decided long ago it was safer to say nothing. He held her gaze for only a moment, then turned his face back to the stone. Not a word. Clara's voice cracked softly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." Still nothing. She tried again. "You come here every Sunday." The boy's shoulders lifted slightly, barely a nod. Then his small hand reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out something carefully folded. A photo. Wrinkled at the edges curled from time and finger wear. He didn't hand it to her, just laid it gently on the cold stone. It was a picture of James Aldridge, but not the James the world knew. This was no businessman in a suit. It was a grainy snapshot, clearly taken with an old phone, showing Aldridge in a hospital gown, hooked up to wires and oxygen. His hand was holding another hand, a much smaller one, the boy's. Clara stared. "That's you?" He didn't answer. She stepped closer, her voice softer now. "Did he save you?" the boy finally whispered, barely audible. "No, ma'am." Then his voice tightened, as if choking on something unspoken. "I saved him." Clara blinked, stunned. "What do you mean?" But he wouldn't say more. He stood up, brushed his jeans off with small, nervous hands, and began to walk. Clara followed instinctively, but he stopped and turned back to her. "I only come here 'cause nobody else does, and someone should." Then he disappeared between the headstones, vanishing like he'd never been there. Clara stared after him, heart pounding. She was trained to know when something mattered, and this, she knew, was no ordinary act of kindness. This boy, this nameless child, was the keeper of a story the world had never heard. A story powerful enough to change how people remembered a man they'd spent decades hating. She picked up the photo and turned it over. There was something scribbled in shaky handwriting on the back. "For the boy who reminded me I was human." Her breath caught. Who was this child? And how did a boy from the poorest part of town end up in the final chapter of a billionaire's life? Clara had followed stories across continents, but she'd never followed a ghost before, and something told her this one wasn't finished. The photo trembled slightly in Clara's fingers. It wasn't just the image, the frail billionaire, the small boy, their hands locked in silence. It was the words scrawled on the back that left her breathless. "For the boy who reminded me I was human." It wasn't Aldridge's writing. She'd seen his signature in cold legal briefs, sharp business contracts, headlines that barked power. This was different, shaky, honest, almost like remorse. She looked up, but the boy was gone. Again. That's what made him feel like a ghost. He didn't walk away. He vanished, like a thought you couldn't hold long enough to understand. Clara sat on the bench, her coffee growing cold, heart pounding. She was trained to sniff out buried stories. But this was personal. There was truth in that photo, but also a secret. And the world hated secrets. She pulled out her notepad and scribbled everything she could remember. The boy's posture, his age, his shoes, his silence. Then the questions. What hospital? What year? Why the secrecy? The next day, Clara drove across town to Hollow Ridge, the poorest part of the city. Aldridge had once promised to revitalize this area, but all he'd done was demolish public housing and build overpriced condos no one here could afford. It was where the boy must have come from, where the story, she suspected, had begun. She showed the photo to shopkeepers, barbers, school guards. Nobody recognized the boy. "Too many kids like him," one grocer said sadly. "In and out of the system. They disappear." Another pointed to a boarded-up daycare and whispered, "That place burned down 3 years ago. Some kids went missing that night. Cops barely looked." Clara's throat tightened. Could this boy be one of them? A survivor? She returned to Hillcrest Cemetery the next Sunday, an hour earlier this time. The grass was still damp with dew, the sun barely peeking over the treetops. And then she saw him, already there. Kneeling beside the grave, his small hand resting on the cold stone like he was holding someone's hand that wasn't there anymore. She approached slowly, gently. "I never got your name." He didn't move. "You don't need it. I want to know your story." He looked up at her, not with fear, but with something deeper, something ancient. "You won't believe it." Clara kneeled beside him, careful not to get too close. "Try me." And for the first time since she'd followed him here, the boy began to speak. He didn't speak like a child. He spoke like someone who'd seen too much and learned early that words can break more than they fix. His voice was quiet, careful, like every sentence had to pass through pain first. "It was cold that night," he said. "We were all in the daycare. Me, Josie, Marcus, little Theo. 7 of us. The power had been out for 2 days. No heat, no lights. Ms. Turner tried to keep us warm, but..." He trailed off. Clara didn't push. She just let the silence hang. There was a spark. Maybe from the old space heater. I don't know. But the fire started fast, smoke everywhere. I grabbed Theo first. He was screaming. I pushed him through the broken window, cut my arms on the glass. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing faint scars. Then I went back for the others. Clara's throat tightened. You were just a kid. I still am, he said with a small, hollow laugh. She blinked. So how does Aldridge fit in? The boy stared at the grave. He was there. Clara froze. At the daycare? Number in the street. He was in his car, one of those big, long ones. He was driving past when I came out carrying Josie. I was coughing, couldn't breathe. I dropped her. He just watched. Clara's stomach dropped. Didn't get out. Didn't call anyone. Just sat there. But he didn't leave, the boy added softly. He rolled down the window, and he looked at me like I was something, I don't know, like I wasn't supposed to exist. And then, the boy's voice changed, hardened, like memory burned behind his eyes. I walked right up to his car, blood on my shirt, smoke everywhere. And I said, if you're not gonna help, then get out. Clara's breath caught. I opened the door, pulled him out. His chest was hurting. He was coughing, barely standing. Heart attack, maybe. I flagged down an ambulance. They took him, left us. And the other kids? She asked. He didn't answer. Why did you save him? She whispered. The boy looked away. I don't know. Maybe I thought he'd save us back. The wind moved through the cemetery, rustling the trees like applause for a truth too heavy for a child to carry. Clara didn't know what to say, because this wasn't just a story. It was a reckoning. And for the first time in her career, she felt afraid to write it. Clara sat in silence for a long time. The boy's story had shattered every headline she remembered about Aldridge's final year. How he'd suddenly disappeared from public view. How rumors swirled about a secret collapse. No one ever mentioned a child. You saved his life, she said quietly. The boy didn't nod. Didn't need to. His silence said enough. Clara reached into her bag, pulling out a notebook. Can I write this? The boy tilted his head. Would it change anything? I don't know, she admitted. He looked up at the sky, squinting through the morning sun. After the fire, they put me in the system. Foster homes. I didn't see him again for almost a year. Thought he forgot me. But then one day, out of nowhere, I get pulled out of school. A man in a suit says Mr. Aldridge wants to meet me. Clara leaned in, pen frozen. They brought me to his mansion. Big glass doors, cold floors, no pictures, no noise, just him, in a wheelchair, looked smaller than I remembered. Clara imagined the billionaire who once ruled city councils, now reduced to silence and shame in his own kingdom. He didn't apologize, the boy said. Didn't even say thank you. Just looked at me and asked, why did you do it? I told him I didn't know, that I just couldn't watch someone die. And then, Clara whispered. He nodded, told his lawyer to set something up. Said I'd be taken care of. Did he? The boy looked away. Sort of. They gave me a place to live, private school, tutors, everything clean and quiet. But he never visited again. I'd write him letters, never got one back. Clara's chest tightened. So why come here? The boy's eyes burned. Because he was human, and he died alone. He reached into his hoodie and pulled out another photo, this one folded clean, crisp. He handed it to Clara. It was Aldridge, sitting in his garden, holding a chessboard on his lap. A small figure stood beside him, barely visible. The boy, smiling. The back read, "My final move wasn't in business. It was in trust." Clara covered her mouth. The story was real, powerful. And maybe if told right, it could rewrite a man's legacy, or at least the boy's. "I want to help you tell it," she said. The boy looked at her, then back at the gravestone. "Only if they hear my name this time." Clara didn't sleep that night. She lay awake in her car, parked under a streetlight outside a shuttered gas station, staring at the ceiling and hearing the boy's voice again and again. Only if they hear my name this time. She couldn't stop thinking about the photo, the final words scrawled on its back. She had covered war zones, sure, but she had never been this shaken by a whisper from the past. The next morning, she walked into a law office with shaking hands. Preston and Dallings, LLP. It was the firm that handled Aldridge's estate. Massive, cold, and wrapped in mahogany and silence. She told the receptionist she was working on a legacy piece for Aldridge's posthumous foundation. A lie, yes, but a necessary one. After nearly 2 hours of waiting, she was led into a private office. The man who greeted her was tall, older, white, and alert. His nameplate read, E. Harold Vance, Senior Estate Executor. Clara pulled out the photo of the boy and Aldridge. "Do you recognize this?" His eyes flickered. "Where did you get that?" "I'm asking the questions," Clara said, firmer now. Vance leaned back. "You're a journalist. You want dirt on a dead man. I want the truth about a living boy." Silence. Then a slow exhale. "The child is protected," Vance said carefully. "Mr. Aldridge arranged for his education, housing, medical, all anonymous. It was his request. No media, no records. The boy's name appears nowhere. But yes, he exists. And yes, he mattered to Mr. Aldridge. Why the secrecy? Because the world wouldn't believe a man like James Aldridge had a heart, and he didn't want to explain himself." Clara's jaw tightened. "The boy deserves to be seen." Vance opened a drawer and slid a small black file across the table. "I can't stop you from opening this. But if you do, you'll be holding a truth powerful enough to rewrite everything people believe about James W. Aldridge." Clara stared at it. Her fingers hovered over the edge. Then she said, almost in a whisper, "I'm not here to save Aldridge's name. I'm here to make sure his savior is no longer invisible." She took the file, and history began to change. Clara carried the file like it was something sacred. She didn't open it right away, not in the office, not in the parking lot. She sat with it on her lap for 10 full minutes, heart hammering, the boy's voice still echoing. "Only if they hear my name this time." Finally, she opened it. At first, the contents were cold. Bank records, housing contracts, medical insurance, everything paid for in full by a trust labeled only the Hollow Ridge Future Fund. But then, near the bottom, a single envelope, handwritten, addressed in thick black ink, to be opened only upon inquiry into my grave. J.W. Her breath caught. Inside was a letter, not typed, handwritten in slanted aging script, the ink smudged in places. But the words were clear. "I made my fortune building things that took space from others. People like him, kids like him. And one night, when I couldn't breathe, when my heart failed and the world shrank into static, he pulled me out. He didn't ask who I was. He didn't care what I owned. He just saved me. I wanted to save him back, but I didn't know how. So I did what I do. I signed papers, moved money, built safety nets from marble and glass. But I never gave him the one thing I withheld from everyone: my name. If someone finds this letter, then it means someone's finally asking who the boy was. His name is Micah Elijah Ward. Tell them. He's the only thing I built that mattered." Clara's hands shook. Micah. The ghost had a name. She looked up at the sky, blinking away sudden tears. For the first time since she met him, the boy had a story she could write. With truth, with weight, with justice. She raced back to the cemetery that Sunday, the grass still wet, the sun still low. Micah was already there. When he saw her, she held up the file. "I know who you are." He looked away. "Too late." Clara stepped closer. It's not too late." And when she said his name out loud, Micah Elijah Ward, He turned to her with eyes wide, blinking back tears he didn't know he still had. "You found it?" he whispered. She nodded. "No more hiding," she said. "You ready to be seen?" Micah looked down at the grave and nodded. The name echoed in the quiet cemetery. Micah Elijah Ward. 3 small words, but to Micah they sounded like thunder, like someone had finally turned on a light in the dark hallway of his life. His chest rose, fell. He stood still, frozen in time, as if that name hadn't belonged to him in years. Clara stepped closer. "You matter, Micah, and I have proof." She handed him the letter. He took it with shaking fingers, read it slowly, twice, then sat on the stone bench, clutching it like it might vanish if he let go. "I thought he forgot me," Micah whispered. "After that day, I thought I was just another thing he stepped over." Clara sat beside him, but not too close. "He didn't step over you. He just didn't know how to look back." Micah looked up. "He left the money, the school, the roof, but not once. Not once did he say he was proud of me." Clara's voice cracked. "He was. He just didn't know how to say it." Micah nodded slowly. "He was afraid." "Of what?" Micah stared at the gravestone. That people would find out the boy who saved him didn't look like him. That his legacy might get smaller if it stood beside mine. Clara felt tears sting her eyes, because she knew he was right. But it wasn't the end of the story. That night, Clara returned to her laptop with fire in her chest. She poured every ounce of truth into her article. The boy who sat on the billionaire's grave. She told the world about Micah Elijah Ward, about the fire, the rescue, the silent years, the hidden trust, the folded photo, the final letter. The story wasn't about Aldridge's redemption. It was about Micah's resilience, his dignity, his patience. Within hours, the story exploded. News outlets picked it up, podcasts, late-night talk shows. The internet swarmed with questions. Who is Micah Ward? And more importantly, why didn't anyone tell us? Micah didn't speak to reporters. He didn't post online. But the next Sunday, when he walked to the cemetery, something was different. The bench across from the grave wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with flowers, notes, letters from strangers, tears from people who had never met him, but saw themselves in him. And for the first time in years, Micah didn't sit in silence. He smiled. Micah wasn't sure what to feel. He had spent years being invisible. Now his name was on headlines, blogs, morning shows. A trending hashtag, #Micah saved him. He didn't post, didn't comment. But when he returned to the cemetery that Sunday, he felt it before he saw it. Change. The bench across from Aldridge's grave was covered in letters, flowers, messages in thick marker from children who wrote, "You're brave. You matter. You made him better." Micah stared at the pile for a long time. He didn't touch anything, just read silently, like each note was proof that he hadn't imagined what happened, that someone finally believed him. Clara joined him a moment later, quiet and slow. She didn't bring a notebook this time. "I thought about something," she said gently. "You always came here to visit his grave." Micah nodded. "But what if the world wanted to visit yours?" Micah looked up, puzzled. She gestured behind her. A second gravestone had been placed, polished black marble, same as Aldridge's. But this one wasn't for a man who had died. It was for a story the world almost buried, etched in silver. Micah Elijah Ward, he never asked to be seen. But he was always worth seeing. Micah's mouth parted. "Why?" "Because you saved a man," Clara whispered. "But more than that, you saved what's left of us." Micah walked to the stone and ran his fingers along his name. For the first time, he didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's story. He felt real. That week, schools invited him to speak. Artists painted murals. Anonymous donations poured into Hollow Ridge Youth Shelter, all marked in honor of Micah, and the estate lawyers confirmed it. Aldridge's will had left his entire remaining fortune, over $38 million, not to corporations or family, but to a single name: Micah. He didn't buy a mansion, didn't disappear. Instead, he rebuilt the daycare, named it the Hollow Ridge Firelight Center, and above the door, in hand-carved wood, "This time, everyone gets out." Years passed, but the grave never gathered dust. Every Sunday, Micah still walked the same gravel path, not as a boy now, but as a young man, taller, older, his hoodie replaced by a clean button-down shirt, but still barefoot, always barefoot. He said it helped him remember where he came from. The cemetery had changed, too. What was once quiet and forgotten now bloomed with color. Visitors came from other towns. Children left chalk drawings on the benches. Some sat silently, just like Micah had once done, honoring not just a billionaire or a hero, but the bond between the two. One morning, a stranger arrived. He was middle-aged, dressed in a faded suit. He looked around nervously before approaching Micah, who was watering the flowers near the gravestones. "You don't know me," the man said softly, "but James Aldridge was my uncle." Micah didn't respond. The man looked down. "I hated him, to be honest. What he stood for, what he did to people like you. But after reading everything, after seeing this," he gestured to the bench covered in fresh letters, "I think maybe you were the only person he ever truly let in." Micah nodded once. He never said sorry. The man swallowed hard. Number. But he did something harder. He changed. Micah turned to the gravestone, pulled out a small item from his pocket, and placed it gently at the base, an old photograph. Crinkled edges, faded ink. The same one from all those years ago, Aldridge in a hospital gown, gripping a tiny soot-stained hand, and next to it, a note in Micah's handwriting. "You didn't save us, but you gave me the chance to save others. That's enough." He stood, took a breath, and walked toward the cemetery gates. Children from the new daycare waited by the road, laughing, some of them barefoot too. They waved when they saw him. "Mr. Ward?" Micah smiled. He looked back one last time. The sun lit the two graves, one for a billionaire who died alone, the other for a boy who saved him in silence. And together, they told a story the world had almost never heard. But now, no one would ever forget.